Thank you. First of all, can I acknowledge Ngunnawal peoples and express my gratitude for their warm welcome, Auntie Agnes, as always. It's beautiful. Before I kick off, I just wanted to probably ask you to reflect on a number of things that the previous speakers have raised. And first of all, I think what Sue had raised, which really impacts on my peoples and the work that I do, is about attitudes. Attitudes towards peoples that have differences to yourselves. And I would ask you to think about what influences those attitudes that you have towards Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples. Is it the media? Is it your work experience? Is it your lived experience? And then try to make some connection when I talk a little bit more. The other thing that I'd like to thank Sandra for too is it's about the nothing about us without us. And again, I ask you to think about what have you done that is included specifically Aboriginal peoples. Sit down, have the conversations, asking them what they think about the policy or the thinking that you have. And the other really important thing that I drew from Cassandra's comments was this issue of privilege, your own personal privilege, that your lived experience, the assumptions that you make, that where you've learnt from, that you might apply those assumptions to the policy that impacts on Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples. And I think the other really important thing is the evidence that Robert raised. I think another thing is the interpretation of that evidence, and the assumption of that evidence really has to be affirmed with Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples so that we can affirm the successes. We can affirm that whatever has been done with us, for us, has achieved some kind of positive outcome. And finally, I think with Bob, look, I think that with collaboration, we've got to start to shake up this democracy. And so how we do it, and I think it's in collaboration as we have done here today. So that's my quickest, wrap up of that. So my conversations now, my comments today will certainly make a connection with this, and hopefully it'll come to a good start to a conversation with us, if it's about us. So what is community for me? As Chris said, I'm from Western Australia. I'm number 3 in 11. I was never poor until somebody told me. When I grew up in a dirt floor, in a tin shack, I was happy. My family was happy. And I progressed to something, and those were the decisions that I made as an individual. But now there's all sorts of interpretations of what success is for us, and I'll get to that in a moment. But for me, community is Keith, Julie, what you guys do in our community and what I do as the elected body chairperson, but also as a member of Congress as well. I'm the director there. But at the local level, I sit on the board of our local medical service. So the connections at each level for my peoples in this community is so important. That keeps me grounded, because if I'm not doing something right in policy, they all tell me. If something's being achieved that either you guys are working in the sector, that you guys are doing or not doing, with or without them, they will let me know. So that's my grounding in community. It's my family. It's more than, I think, not the kitchen table conversations. Aboriginal affairs used to be the barbecue conversations. That where people will pick up the paper, read what's in the paper, and then say, oh, well, them black fellas get all this and they get all that, there's so much money being spent there and so on. How does the evidence then equate to the poor outcomes? So the effort's going in, the dollars are going in, but families are still not reaching their full potential and so on. So there are a number of questions around that. But with community, It's about love, as Cassandra said. It's about happiness. Those are two critical things that your policies, anybody's government's policy, investment does not measure. And I think it's important that we should be thinking about that. And community includes businesses, includes the volunteers, and I know there's many volunteers in this room that invest their time for no return, but you actually get some satisfaction. That's not measured. And some of us actually get a little bit greyer and older quicker when we get out there and start to do all those things. But community is this for me. It's my heart. And I'm sure it is for many others. And our community, as much as people may think, we are part of the civil society. There's no getting away from that. All the time when people talk about Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander affairs, it's too complex. Now, if I think that we're in a room of extremely highly intelligent people, as I think, Sandra again, sorry to use you a lot here, what the corporate sector does is, let's work it out. And I think that's what we can do in the sector. We work it out. And we have solutions. We do have ideas. We have lots of experience. We know what makes us feel good. We want to be able to share that with you so that you understand that. So part of civil society is about what Andrew said about the equality. You know, since invasion, our peoples have not had that sense of equality. We pursue this equality through human rights, the UN Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples, and there is nothing that I can see that is going to give a total advantage over anybody else's rights with the UN Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples. But it's giving us that position in civil society the closest to being equal and treated as equal, having equal access, living equal lives. And I don't think it's not too hard a thing to ask, because the policies that Andrew mentioned this morning, stolen generations, I'm a stolen generations person myself, but the White Australia policy, the impacts of that, even today, the ideologies that are still around are still there. And it is, absolutely. You know, so I think that we can be given a fair go, and I'm starting to feel that from Bob's presentation, that fair go principle is starting to disappear in this society. And I think the ways that this can come about to be addressed is that we ask ourselves, am I being fair? Am I being just? Am I being truthful to not only myself, my family, but also to a civil society? This social change that I think, if we reflect on the corporate sector and so on, a number of years ago, there was a lot of conversation around social investment, social change, social obligation. Today, the talk is about return on that social investment. And if you reflect, or you read in the papers, or you read anywhere, is about the investments made in Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples is enormous, but there are no outcomes or limited outcomes. There are small pockets of outcomes, so there's an assumption made from that evidence that this didn't work, so well, let's go and try something else. For me, and in my work that I do, mainly advocacy through the elected body of the National Congress, is about collecting that evidence to put forward the strong arguments. But put forward that evidence to you and a few others and say, let's sit down. What does this actually mean to you? What does it mean to me? And let's close that gap in that level of understanding and acceptance about what that actually means, and then move to the next step to say we're going forward on this as a group. And it's not one of those things about, doing stuff for us without us. Because we need to constantly have that confirmation and that affirmation about, this might work, but it might not. If I could just touch quickly on that issue of privilege, that position of privilege. It comes from your personal lived experience. What you have had the opportunities to learn, to grow, is your privilege. And what I have learnt and grown up with and been able to manage whatever came at me and saw things as an opportunity and grasped those opportunities, I thought, well, that's my privilege. And I think that's where I learn. I pass that on to my families, my children and my siblings and so on. So that's about social change. So how I inform myself so I can then inform those who don't have access to the information, this is my contribution to that social change. The really important thing in this collaboration, the elected body's been around, this is its third term of office. We have elections, we use a democratic process, we've set up under legislation here in the ACT, but not a lot of people know about it. And not a lot of people know that it's the only one in the country. Congress is not as mature, I'd say, not as old as the elected body. But we had a voter turnout that was fairly low last year, or last term, and we as the members decided that we would make some changes, and we put forward some changes to government and the Electoral Commission, the ACT Electoral Commission, and came up with some workable ideas. And then we've actually doubled the turnout this term, but it's not where we'd like to do it when we know we've got something around 5,000 or 6,000 Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples living in the ACT. We'd like more to turn out and vote. Because governments will zero in on the numbers of people who turn out to vote. But it's not compulsory to vote in these elections, and it's not compulsory to vote in the Congress elections. But it's about us doing our business. And one of the things that I feel is a success in that social change and that democratic process was because our numbers were small, it didn't matter because we got to a point where now the ACT government has agreed to enter into a whole of government agreement with the elected body and the Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander community. For me, that is success. Now we can really start to talk about and negotiate what we can achieve and where the investments should be and what are the measurable outcomes. Just to finish up on those things, the rights of Indigenous peoples, UN Declaration, simple things about the right to equal education, that equality. This is all in, I guess, the civil society, the health, education, economic development, the rights to make decisions that impact on you, to participate in that decision-making process. And they are not dissimilar to the human rights. And I'll just finish off by saying that, reiterating that point about measuring success and the interpretation of what is success. Sure, we might have a program with all of the processes ticking all the boxes and accounting for the money, but where is the social change, the effect of that? And I think that involving Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples in the decision-making process, but also the design and development of the program and the measuring implements to ensure that we are participating equally in this social change. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Rod. Ladies and gentlemen, we've actually run out of time. I think we're going to risk running into our next session. So I'd just like to pick up really quickly on what you mentioned, Rod, there in terms of privilege, and that I think everyone in this room has the privilege to be involved in that social change in whatever way. And I think you've wrapped up really well what everyone says, the privilege to be involved through advocacy or through activism, through research or through understanding. So I think that's something, hopefully, that nothing about us without us we can all take away as a key message from today. And perhaps we could extend on Bob's kitchen table conversation. If you've got some questions for all of our panellists today, we can have a cup of tea conversation as we go to morning tea, and an opportunity for you to speak to them directly. But I think, really interesting to hear from all of our panellists today. Thank you very much to everyone for coming, and please join with me in thanking our contributors today.